Welcome everyone. Today I want to talk about the lessons of instructional design on the teaching of computer science. You can see the agenda below, and let's get started. Astronomer Cliff Stoll once said, the first time you do something it's science, the second time it's engineering, and the third time it's just being a technician. I would doubt anyone would question the impact of society of the technology on the modern world. From checking an app to using a computer, technology has an impact, and the youth of today are the mass consumers of new technology. We live in an age that has more access to information than at any other time in human history. But is more information really better? A lot of information could be considered just garbage. Artist M.C. Escher said, "We adore chaos because we love to produce order." I would argue that the pursuit of computer science will take information chaos and turn it into information order. However, the people creating or serving this technology aren't always meeting the needs of the consumers. The youth today can stay the consumer on the outside or be part of it on the inside. So this, to me, justifies the important place that computer science places in our modern education system. Despite this, it still has many challenges. For example, a computer science education program is part of most major universities, although it's only a small part of the Canadian high school experience. A lot of high schools are still not able to offer computer science to our students. I hope this presentation will look at the connections between computer science education and the field of instructional design, doing this through the lens of a computer science teacher with 22 years of computer science instruction experience at multiple levels, along with my personal teaching philosophy as a guide. Let's start with some definition of terms. So the term computer science, if we look at the word computer, its etymology comes from the Latin word com, which means to come together, and putere, to settle an account. So it was first used for that purpose. Then, as it was applied to people, when it was first used in the 1600s up to the 1900s for doing calculations. The first time it was applied to a machine was around 1946, which was a device for calculations. So the word itself isn't that old, and now we use the word computer as an umbrella term to encompass many different areas of technology. The word science originally had its etymology as the word knowledge, or what is known. So we could put those together, interpret the meaning of computer science as people who do things, calculations, and know things. Obviously, this phrase has evolved over time. From our more modern perspective, computer science is both a theoretical and a practical subject area. When I define it to students, I usually say computer science, if you want to know what it is, it's step-by-step problem solving on the computer using code. Now, looking at the term instructional design that has been come to be used, has its origins in behaviorism, advancing into Bloom's taxonomy and into where we look at it now. A working definition could be the creation of experiences and materials in a manner that results in learning. Now I want to move to our second item, my personal teaching philosophy. I started in the late 1990s working in the software development industry. Previously, I'd been in university since my high school graduation in the late 80s, working through a degree in history and a degree in computer science with minors in philosophy and mathematics, and then went back in the late 1990s to get my degree in education. And I've worked as a teacher since the late 90s for the last 22 years, teaching computer science amongst other subjects. I want to make sure my passion for computer science education came across while making connections and relationships with my students. My early philosophy included describing myself as a warm demander, wanting results but maintaining that relationship with students. Over time, this would evolve as I adapted more educational paradigms like authentic evaluation, effective engagement. As a student of philosophy, I could feel my position was certainly one of a reductionist and an objectivist, and I would consider sense perception and reason as the fundamental basic ways of knowing in my philosophical positions. I would have to say to students, solving problems is how we learn. I feel this is a strong part of my subject area. I also like to guide students and help them and show them how to solve problems, how to learn, and equipping them with the tools. I will use my personal teaching philosophy as my perspective as I approached the literature review of my first assignment. In the first paper, A Holistic Approach to Computer Science Education in Secondary Schools, the study examined the effectiveness for computer science at a secondary level through instructional design, development, implementation, framed within the ADDIE instructional design model. This gave me a chance through this literature review to examine that model as it relates to computer science. The researcher used a mixed methods approach, and they incorporated the ADDIE model, and the ADDIE model, which was the sort of framework for most of the instructional design models that followed. As I looked at how it applied to computer science education, I felt that the model did match up well, not only with computer science, but with my personal teaching philosophy. However, I'd like to pull that back and say a little bit that the research team that stated in the study that teaching practices in computer science depend very highly on how much of a team approach is used when applying the ADDIE model. I also used this study as a chance to present a counter-argument and compare the ADDIE model to the Dick and Carey model. The Dick and Carey would build from the ADDIE model to include things like an emphasis on goals and objectives having a real-world application, more context for the learners, more emphasis on implementation strategies, and a final revision step. When I moved to my second paper, a conceptual model for an SSM approach towards the improvement of the instructional design of the computer science module, I looked at a lesser known ID model known as the software systems methodology. Its origins were in computer science, so it was interesting to see how it would relate to education and specifically computer science education. It had three aims: examine a problematic situation, plan an intervention, and act to improve the situation. This brought forward a point that a lot of the other models missed: the incorporation of a feedback loop. It made me examine the criticisms of the ADDIE model as being too linear and without a self-correcting mechanism, whereas the SSM model promotes itself as having this feature. I acknowledge that ADDIE and Dick and Carey could be interpreted as having this cyclical component, but I would make an argument that it's not a cyclical component, but a recursive feedback loop that doesn't really offer that mechanism for improvement. The SSM model, to me, as a computer science educator, matched the computer science concept of agile methodology, including the software development lifecycle. When I moved to my paper 3, which had an interesting title, "Don't Bother Me with Instructional Design, I'm Busy Programming," this article from the University of Utah, they examined three aspects of instructional design: that strategies believed to have a direct impact on the amount of learning, an examination of screen display techniques, and identifying human factors, characteristics, and concerns with educational software and its usability resulting in more efficient learning. This study and this article really focused on the educational software, but it gave me the opportunity to look at learning theories behind the instructional design models. Learning theories defined as conceptual frameworks describing how information is absorbed, processed, and retained during the process. I can support this with this quote: "Learning theories are descriptive and make general statements about how people learn. Learning theories, explicitly or implicitly, play a major role in the field of instructional design and educational technology." So this can be put into several philosophical classifications, including behavioralism, cognitivism, constructivism, and humanism. And I use this article as an opportunity to examine those learning theories and tie it back to my own personal teaching philosophy. Wrapping this up with my conclusions and recommendations, I hope this presentation has demonstrated the connections of instructional design and computer science, and how my personal philosophy evolved from a cognitivist and humanist perspective, leading more into a behavioralist and a little bit of constructivism, and all of those tied together. The literature reviews strengthened my perspective that in a logic-based course like computer science, reason as a way of knowing is a paramount part of my philosophy, and that the behavioralist philosophies of models like ADDIE fit well into my personal paradigm. That first article was an examination of those traditional ID models, ADDIE and my Dick and Carey examination, which are still relevant in computer science education. The second article was a less traditional but more subject-related ID model, the SSM. And the final article was a look at a more macro examination of learning theories together with my personal teaching philosophy. My recommendations would be for computer science education to adapt a hybrid of the ADDIE model and the SSM ID models. The meticulous methodology of ADDIE, along with the problem-solving perspective of SSM, match well with the field of computer science. I would also recommend maybe further research into progressive ID models like the GOMS model, which describes human-computer interaction reduced to goals, operators, methods, and selection. A further recommendation would be to incorporate things from the industry of software development, like the agile methodology and the software development lifecycle, and incorporate those into the instructional design model. I would argue that this could improve the educational process, leading to self-correcting ideologies that ID would has criticized as being too linear in its own methodology. Thank you, everybody.